For this next example, we want to look at the functions f of x equals x squared plus 4 and g of x equals the square root of 6 minus x. So let's find f divided by g of x. So that means we're going to do f of x divided by g of x, and we'll get x squared plus 4 divided by the square root of 6 minus x. There's nothing else we can do. This is our final answer. And now let's talk about the domain of x squared plus 4 divided by the square root of 6 minus x. So we have a special case here. We actually have a combo. And in this combo special case, we have a variable in our denominator, we have a rational expression, and we have a radical. And so when we're finding the domain, we have to consider the things that are excluded from the numerator denominator based on whether we have a radical and where that variable is. So our numerator, the numerator is x squared plus 4. Nothing is excluded from that. So now what we need to do is focus on our denominator, right? And so our denominator has a radical and it has a variable. We know we cannot divide by 0. And we want to restrict the things that are underneath the radical to positives. So that means that our domain needs to account for we want the square root of 6 minus x to be positive, so we want it to be greater than 0, and we don't include the equal to bar because we do not want it to equal 0. So this is how we'll find the domain. And now we'll solve. And so we have the square root of 6 minus x needs to be bigger than 0. We can square both sides. And so the square root and the square cancel, and we're left with 6 minus x is bigger than 0. And now we can solve by either adding x to both sides, or we can do it the longer way, which might be more easy to understand, by subtracting 6 from both sides. And we're left with negative x is bigger than negative 6. And now we'll divide both sides by negative 1. And we have to flip the inequality because we're dividing by a negative. So our final answer is that x needs to be less than 6. So this is the domain. X needs to be less than 6, but we want to write it in interval notation. So if graphing it helps you to see the interval, then let's do that. These are our values of x. Let's see. We want x to be smaller than 6, so it's an open circle over 6 and points to the left in negative infinity's direction. So the domain, the interval is negative infinity, comma 6. I'm sorry this looks so messy. Again, I'm at an appointment, so now I'm in the car trying to have more quiet place for you all. So negative infinity, comma 6 is the domain, and we can pull this up on our calculator and look at the picture, look at the graph, and look at the table, right? So bringing up the calculator, we have y equals, oops, let me go down. Alpha, y equals, choose number 1, and we have x squared plus 4 as our numerator. So x squared plus 4. And now in denominator, we have square root of 6 minus x. We can look at our graph. Our graph kind of looks familiar, looks like a parabola, but there's some exclusions. And the exclusions might more clearly be seen from the table. So we'll go second graph to look at the table. And as long as our x's are really, really small, like we get a -8, we get a number out, right? If we go down, we're still good, no error messages. But now once we get to 6, we get these error messages for every value that's bigger than 6. So that lets us know our domain is restricted to only include values that are smaller than 6 because we get no error messages. All right, now let's do another piece to this. So we'll say this was part A. A. Let's do f of g of x, and then let's find the domain. So let's do some function composition. Make this part B. F of g of x, which your text writes as f og, fog of x. And this means we're going to plug g into f. Okay, and so our functions were x squared plus 4, and g of x was the square root of, I think, 6 minus x. Let's make sure, yep, 6 minus x. And so we want to plug g into f. So we're taking all of this and we're putting it right here. And so our g going into f is going to be the square root of 6 minus x. Keep the squared and add the plus 4. And now what happens when we square the square root? It cancels out and we're left with 6 minus x plus 4. Simplify this and we get negative x plus 10 is the answer for our function composed, but we have to consider the domain, okay?